Hey everyone, it's Jennifer Edwards, and I am back with my friend Shayna Bergman. Last time we talked about what it takes to be a kick-ass leader, and that we are going to be doing a series together. Hey Shayna!
Hi, Jen.
And what it takes to be a kick-ass leader. We also talked about the fact that everyone is a leader everywhere in their life. It is not just about our role at work or a position that we hold in the community. It's our friends, our family, our children. Everywhere we have an impact on someone else, we're a leader. So, as we talked last time about taking responsibility for your life, if you missed that, go listen. It was very important. And today we are going to talk about what is needed to actually take responsibility for your life and take the action needed to create what you want in leadership. So, Shayna, would you like to talk about what we're going to talk about
I
today?
would I would have to. Yeah. So one of the things that we spoke about when we were talking about this concept of responsibility and leadership is you've got to be aware, right? You've got to know what is going on. What am I dealing with? What's in front of me where maybe there's a change to be made or there's a mindset shift to happen. And nothing can happen if we don't actually have awareness around it. And that's, I
Right.
think, why you and I do what we do is to create that awareness. It's like sometimes we're walking around in a bit of a fog or a haze,
Yes.
or we don't really stop to think about what is the impact this is having on me, on somebody else? What do I really want here? We so rarely self reflect. And when we don't have an opportunity to do that, how can we become aware of anything, right?
Exactly. And awareness is not easy to achieve. We see what we see, and we tend to keep seeing the same things over and over again. And that's where getting help can be very instrumental. The other thing is that there are layers of awareness, right? So a lot of people are aware of, their stuff, the things that get in their way, the things that they do that annoy them or annoy other people, or where they really feel disempowered. And they say, well, I know I just constantly get stopped because I'm so insecure, or I lack confidence, or I'm intimidated, or I just get angry, but I can't not do it. Like, I don't know how to change my action, even
Mhm.
though I am aware of what's going on. So, Shayna, what do you think might help people in learning how to actually take action?
So I love this question. And as you're talking, I'm already thinking of future things to talk about because you and I
Okay.
sort of have a little bit of a secret key to what gets in the way. And so we won't get into that now, but part of what we do is really, right, we're able to help people identify, why am I feeling stuck? Why am
Right.
I feeling disconnected? Why can't I take action? But one of the biggest things is to sort of be able to say, like, okay, so this is going on for me. You don't have to necessarily like it, but to be able to start to accept what is, to accept the reality, is one of the first steps to being able to do something about it, right? Because becoming self aware, like you said, is not easy to do. And even when we are self aware, knowing what to do with it can be tricky. But then the next step of it is, okay, well, now that I know that this is what's happening for me, or this is what I want, or this is what's getting in the way, I need to now sort of accept what is so that I can do something,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, precisely. And one of the things, and this is kind of our little key lesson for today, is we all say, well, just accept it. And it's like, well, when you're triggered and you're pissed off or upset or hurt, it's not so easy to just say, well, what do I accept it? Is this about just pretending I like things?
Mm-hmm.
No, this is not about inauthenticity. This is not about suppressing emotions, but it's about looking at judgment.
Yeah.
So, so the key to all of the things we're going to actually talk about in the future to get past what's getting in our way is to start to look at where we hold judgment about people, situations, whatever is going on. Because when we have a judgment that they, him, her, they, the situation are wrong, or it shouldn't be that way, or this was done to me, or every time she does that, I know what she's thinking. We make assumptions about other people's thoughts. We judge things as right and wrong. That judgment, while it seems like it's directed out there at the other, whatever is out there, it's actually impacting in here and holding us back. It's like we're like bound by this judgment that seems like it's the truth.
Mm-hmm. So there's a story I want to share for a minute, and I have to shout out somebody you and I both know because she helped remind me of this. So this is a shout
Okay.
out to Kelly
Yay,
Turcott, who coached
Kelly.
me. And there was a situation I was in where I was really struggling with something. I was angry, I was upset, I was sad, having a lot of big feelings around it, and stuck. And that, to your point, I wasn't at a place of saying, well, this is just fine, and it is. I was angry and I didn't know what to do about it. And part of my frustration was the frustration with the frustration. It was like, why can't I get myself to a place of being able to do something about this?
Yes.
And she had to remind me, like, you have so much judgment around what you're experiencing right now. There's no way out. So instead of continuing to try to claw yourself out of this place, be in it. Be in the suck, be in the hurt, be in the sad, be in the mad, you know. And
Yes.
it was like once I was able to sort of just accept what was happening, not that I was okay with it, but that it just was, and to sort of sit in it, guess what? All of a sudden, in time, it started to dissipate and I was ready to take that action step. But it wasn't happening because I was trying to claw my way out of all these feelings that I didn't like having.
Yeah. And that is, it is such an important thing for people to understand that it's what I call primary and secondary judgment. So you're in a situation that upset you in whatever way. And so you wouldn't be upset if you didn't have judgment. And it's not to say that judgment is right, wrong, good, or bad. It just is. And if I wasn't judging something, it wouldn't upset me. I call that the primary judgment. And sometimes it serves a purpose to be upset, and we need to allow ourselves to be upset. But then there's the secondary judgment. And that's that little voice that sits out here saying, why are you letting this bother you? And especially for people who do like what we do, like you're a coach, you've studied all this stuff, you should know better, blah, blah, blah. Or if I'm like, I'm fully aware that I'm being triggered and I'm like, I'm so triggered right now. Why can't I just turn it off? Like, why can't I just make it go away? It's because this little voice that's saying, you should know better. You shouldn't be upset. Why do you let him get to you? Why this? Why that? Like, blah, blah, blah. You should have stood up. You should have said this. And we can't even begin to address the initial thing that upset us because we're too busy listening to the squawking.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, you know, you and I obviously do a lot of work around this with our clients, right? We
Yes.
address that sort of that little inner voice, that little inner critic that's
Yes.
constantly there. And I think sometimes people don't realize we all have it. It's there no matter what. And if you don't think you have one, you have one.
Yes.
And so, right, we do a lot of work to identify like, what is it? And what is that thing saying to you? What is that little sort of external voice saying to you? And it might change from time to time, but we typically sort of have words that we hear from that little inner
Yes.
voice. But it's when we can identify what that is that we then get to decide, are we going to listen, right? Or are we going to say, not right now. I don't want
Right.
to listen to you right now. I know you're here. I'm good. Let me move on without you. But that takes work, right? That
Yes.
piece to move from the acceptance to the action and to have that secondary judgment piece be identified and then sort of what are you going to do with it? That is where so much of the work comes in
Right.
because it's not as simple as just saying like, well, I'm just not going to listen to that little voice that I hear with everything I do. We all have it, right? It's been there our whole lives. And so it takes the work to figure out, well, what do I do with that little voice I'm hearing?
Right. And if somebody's saying, do I have that little voice? It's the little voice that just asked if you have the little voice. That is the little voice. Right?
Yes.
And I think as you're speaking, what just popped into my mind is, might be an idea for a future talk would be to talk about the voice,
Mm-hmm.
what that means. How do people try to start to handle that and understand it more, or even identify it, and what the impact is of that? Um, but it's almost like, and this is, I've seen this over and over and over with clients. I've seen it with friends. I've even seen it in myself. We all have it. Some of us are aware of it. Some people aren't aware. They just think it's the
Yes.
truth. But people, even people who are aware that they have whatever the voice is saying to them about themselves, there's almost like the secrecy and shame about it. Like, I have to pretend like nobody knows that I think I'm a failure. Um,
Yeah,
and when people start to learn that that's completely normal, that everybody has a version of that, it's not all the same, but a different version of the same thing. It's like, oh my gosh, this is normal. There's not something wrong with me. You mean I can actually start to change that? Worlds open up. Possibility.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think to your point, some people think it's just truth. It just is. Right. And I think that's what makes it really hard to identify, do I even have one or don't I? And that's where
Right.
sometimes having an objective third party come in and say, I can hear it for you. Let me tell you what I think it's saying, and let's kind
Yes.
of talk about it, is important. And, you and I were just talking about this, how there are workshops, right, that we do where we help large teams,
Mm.
right, identify everybody's individual voice and even share them, because from the CEO down to the intern, everybody has that little voice. Everybody hears it. It's just a matter of being able to take a moment to reflect on, what is it saying to me right now? And to your point, it's everything from, yeah, I'm not smart enough, I'm not tenured enough, I'm not an expert enough in this thing, some version of I'm not good enough that
Mhm.
we all hear. And so for anybody who's listening, like, I would ask yourself, what is that? What are you hearing? Right? Because that's the start, is what is your version of that little voice? What's it saying to you?
Yeah. And we started out by talking about judgment. And this is the biggest form of self-judgment. And it's such a strong self-judgment that, like we said, it actually occurs as the truth, that it doesn't even seem like you're judging yourself. You're just recognizing in an is about you, an am. Well, I just am, or I'm just not smart enough. Like, I'm just not. I never have been, and I'm just not, right? Like, as if it's somehow the truth.
Mhm.
And when you can start to understand that some of these truths are actually just stories that you made up when you were really young, you can start to actually make up new ones
Mhm.
that are more empowering. And it's incredible when you can start to not only see the impact that this has on your life and how it holds you back, but when you can start to actually have a choice about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. What's interesting too, and not to get too heady about it, right? But there's also this me focus, right? When we're so focused on the little thing, that little
Hmm.
voice we're hearing in our head, it's such a me focused world that we're living in. And it shuts us off from, like, connecting and what's happening with others and what is impact on others, because we're so in our head. And I was talking to a client about this yesterday, in fact, because he had to get up and give a presentation, and he was so worried about, what if I sound like this and they're going to think this, and write all the stories that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And he stopped and he said, I have completely forgotten about the whole purpose of what I'm talking about and the connection I'm trying to make, because I'm so focused on myself.
Yeah.
And it was like, yes,
And
that's exactly.
and that's the irony of it. I mean, imagine, being in a meeting, a multi-person meeting, strategizing or whatever at work, and everybody's contributing, right? And so if a person is sitting there just kind of, oh my gosh, everybody here is so much smarter than me. Like, are they going to think my ideas are stupid? Like, all these things are going, so they contribute a little hesitantly because they need to. But then they're like, was that dumb? What are they thinking? Oh my God, how I can't compete, like blah, 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 right? Well, how it shows up is that they're not interested. Or other people might be like, does she not like us? Like, does she not want to be part of this team? Like, nobody else understands because they don't see you that way. They
Right.
think you're amazing. They don't know that you're sitting there thinking that you're not good enough in some way, shape, or form. So, yeah, the impacts are so extensive. And in that moment, we are not part of the group. We're not connecting with others. We're just hunkered in our little bubble of insecurity. And it's so limiting. It holds us back. It keeps us small. It's not necessary.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, it's important too to identify, right, for people, that thought that we're having, the I'm not good enough thought, right? The I'm not smart enough thought is just a thought. And we actually get to choose the thoughts that we have. Some are automatic and they're very habitual, but it doesn't mean that we can't choose them.
Right.
And if we think about the impact of what you just said, right? The I'm not smart enough, the thinking that happens makes us feel small, makes us feel kind of bad, makes us feel like we don't belong. And then there's an impact, right? There's a behavior that happens, which is playing small. Maybe you even look small, right? Maybe you're sort of sitting back. And so if we think about the idea that our thoughts impact our feelings, which impact our behaviors and impact our results, you realize where it all stems from, right? Is that thinking. It's that little voice. And so to your point, when you change that story, you change that thought, all of a sudden you feel different, you act different, and your impact is different.
100%. And with that, it takes practice and it takes a pretty good level of self-awareness to be able to change our thoughts. One of the first steps is, if you're having the same thought and you can't actually choose it, is you can choose whether or not to believe it.
Yeah.
And so one of my favorite sayings is, don't believe your thoughts.
Yeah.
Most of your thoughts are actually not true. And it's not because you're stupid or just wrong. It's just because that's what our minds do.
Yeah.
So we can choose. I have thoughts that come through my head all the time.
Yeah.
My disempowering stories that I'm fully aware of, and they come through and I go, no, 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 thank you. And I just forge forward,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of practice, and it's, takes we've all worked with coaches, and we've, taken programs, and it's skills. It's like lifting weights, right? First step is to become aware of them. Second step is to start to not believe them, and then actually starting to be able to create new ones.
Absolutely.
The other thing to remember, just real quick, and we're almost finished, is to remember that all the other people at the table, they're actually having similar thoughts about themselves. It's not just you.
That's right. That's right. And I think we forget that, right? We see somebody projecting confidence, we see somebody speaking boldly, and our assumption is like, well, they must not have the same thoughts I do. Yes, they do. They're just choosing whether or not to believe them in that moment.
Right. Or putting on a big facade. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes people overdo it, right? So when we look at people who are arrogant or bullies, those, as we all know, are some of the most insecure people that are lacking confidence in the moment, or they wouldn't act that way. So that's almost like an overcompensation for feeling so critical of yourself or so judgmental of yourself. It's like you just take it out on other people. That's the other extreme.
Absolutely.
And then there's people in the middle who just they're good actors.
Yeah.
And then there are the people who truly have given themselves the grace of releasing self-judgment and just allowing themselves, I'm going to share all my ideas. And if one of them isn't good, okay, great. Maybe the other ones will be,
Absolutely. I love
So,
this work. I love talking about it
yes.
because it's so magical, really, when you start to figure out how much power you have with how you show up, right? And that's what we're talking about as a leader, how you show up, how you're able to become aware, release that judgment, understand that you can choose your thoughts or choose whether or not to believe them. It's like this incredible world unlocks for you that I think we just don't realize sometimes without those tools. And to your point, it's not overnight, right? It is like lifting weights, but it
Yes.
can be done. And it's just like, it's so much fun to watch it happen.
Yes. So I just invite everybody to explore this. If you have questions about it, feel free to message either one of us. Put some notes in the comments, in below wherever you're watching this, because this obviously will be on multiple platforms. And we invite you to keep tuning in. This is going to be an ongoing series every week or so. And every time we talk, like if you saw me looking down, I was already jotting down ideas that for future talks. Like we just have a list going of so many things, tools, tricks that can just help you to be empowered everywhere in your life, to have an amazing impact on others, shine your light, let yourself be big, and be happy.
Beautiful. Beautiful way to end it.